A republic is easy to imagine beginning with a law, a vote, or a tidy public ceremony. Rome did not remember its republic that way. Rome remembered it beginning in a house at Collatia, with Lucretia dead, her husband and her father beside her, and Lucius Junius Brutus lifting the knife that had just ended her life. In the Roman account, that knife becomes more than the evidence of grief. It becomes the object over which men swear that kings will never rule Rome again. That is a severe beginning, and it must be handled with care. Lucretia's tradition is an account of sexual violence, coercion, reputation, household honor, aristocratic anger, and political revolt. It should not be turned into spectacle, and it should not be softened until the violence disappears. The task is to understand why Romans set this event at the birth of their republic, and why the word rex, meaning king, became one of the most dangerous words in Roman politics. The episode asks 4 questions. First, what kind of evidence is the Lucretia tradition, and how much can it safely carry? Second, why did an assault inside one aristocratic household become a case against kingship itself? Third, what did Rome claim to put in the place of a king? And fourth, what did Roman liberty mean at the beginning, before later generations fought over who actually shared in it? The first answer is caution. The main ancient authors who give the full Lucretia account, above all Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus, wrote centuries after the end of Rome's monarchy. Livy wrote in the late 1st century BC, long after Rome had become ruler of the Mediterranean, and long after Roman aristocrats had learned to use early history as a language for public morality. Dionysius wrote in the same broad period for a Greek-reading audience. Neither man was taking notes at Collatia in 509 BC. That does not make the account useless. It changes the kind of truth to expect from it. A late tradition can preserve real political memory even when it cannot preserve every private word, every exact date, or every movement in a room. The episode is safest held this way. Lucretia is not a court transcript from the late 6th century BC, but she is central to the way Romans explain the fall of kingship. The distinction matters because Rome's beginning traditions were never only about facts in the narrow sense. They were about the kind of city Romans believed they had become. The tradition of Romulus explained violent foundation and brotherhood. The tradition of the last kings explained city-making, drainage, temples, and the poison of royal power. The tradition of Lucretia explained why kingship crossed the line from authority into tyranny. It gave Rome a memory in which the private conduct of a ruling household proved that the whole political order had become unbearable. The tradition begins by asking its audience to see Lucretia before the assault. She is not brought in as an anonymous victim. She is brought in as a woman whose household conduct makes her, in Roman memory, almost impossible to accuse. The famous comparison scene is simple. Noble husbands return unannounced to see what their wives are doing. Some women are found feasting. Lucretia is found working at the loom among her maids. That detail sounds domestic, and in Roman memory it is political. A matrona was a respectable married Roman woman, one whose status, household, marriage, and reputation carried the honor of a family. Pudicitia means sexual virtue or chastity, and in Roman usage it carried also restraint, modesty, reputation, and right conduct within the household. Lucretia did long service in later Rome as the model of the ideal matrona, faithful, industrious, orderly, beyond reproach. To a modern listener, the loom may seem a small image. For Romans, it could hold an entire social claim. Woolworking was one of the old signs of respectable female virtue in the home. It joined the house to discipline, continuity, labor, and self-command. When later Romans set Lucretia at the loom, they were doing more than describing furniture. They were saying that the royal house violated a woman whom Roman memory had made the image of a rightly ordered home. That is why the second question matters so much. Why did this become political? It became political because Rome did not part the ruling house from the state as a modern bureaucracy parts office from family. Tarquin's son was not merely a private criminal in the Roman imagination. Sextus Tarquinius was a prince, son of Tarquinius Superbus, the last king, and his rank gave him access, confidence, and the presumption that he could act above ordinary restraint. The remembered coercion is precise and terrible. Sextus comes to Lucretia's chamber by night. He threatens her with death. When that is not enough, he threatens to kill her and to lay the body of an enslaved man beside her, so that people will believe she died in adulterous disgrace. The threat is not physical violence alone. It is an attempt to control what the crime will mean after it has happened. Sextus wants power over Lucretia's body and then power over her name. That is one reason the account kept its force. Reputation was no decorative concern in Roman aristocratic life. It shaped marriage and inheritance, status, family memory, and public standing. A household lived partly through what others believed of it. Sextus' threat strikes that world directly. He does not only threaten to kill Lucretia, he threatens to leave behind a false version of her life, a version in which the victim would appear guilty and the royal crime would vanish into shame. The account should stay plain here, because the Roman tradition itself is plain about the coercion. Lucretia is assaulted. She is then placed in the impossible position the tradition gives her, alive with the knowledge of what was done to her and aware that the royal son had tried to make even her memory vulnerable. Later Romans praised her response, debated it, moralized it, and worried over it. Some made her the supreme figure of chastity. Augustine, writing much later as a Christian bishop, asked hard questions about consent, suicide, and moral responsibility. Those later arguments show that Lucretia was never simple, even for those who claimed to honor her. Then the account changes scale. Lucretia summons her husband Collatinus, her father, and trusted men of the aristocratic circle around them. Brutus is among them. She tells them what was done. Then she dies by her own hand. The Roman tradition does not leave the room in private mourning. Brutus takes up the knife, calls the men around him to action, and swears to drive out Tarquin and all the royal family. Brutus needs a word of explanation, for later Romans made him one of the great first names of republican liberty. Lucius Junius Brutus was remembered as a kinsman of the Tarquins who had survived royal danger by seeming harmless until the right moment came. Whether that detail is recoverable history matters less than the role he plays in Roman memory. He is the man who turns grief into a public oath, the man who says that the crime of a royal son lays bare the danger of kingship itself. This is still no democratic revolution in the modern sense. The men who first act are aristocrats. Collatinus is Lucretia's husband and a leading figure. Her father belongs to the same world of Roman standing. Brutus is no outsider speaking for a mass movement. The Roman people and the army enter the tradition, but the engine of the change is a coalition of the powerful against the ruling house. The point is essential, because early Roman liberty begins as a struggle among great households before it becomes a wider argument about the rights of ordinary citizens. Nor did the assault create resentment out of nothing. Roman memory had already darkened the last king. Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, appears as arrogant, coercive, and contemptuous of restraint. The tradition remembers forced labor, public works pressed hard upon the people, an overbearing royal household, and a ruling family that no longer treated the other leading families as peers. Lucretia's assault becomes the concentrated proof of a larger political disease. That is how a household crime becomes a case against monarchy. The issue is not only that Sextus did evil. The issue is that his evil seems to flow from a position no one can answer while kingship survives. If the king's son can enter a noble house, use force, threaten false disgrace, and expect his rank to shield him, then the king's household has grown stronger than the moral order it was meant to guard. For Roman memory, that is tyranny. The tradition moves from oath to expulsion. Brutus and his allies carry the accusation against Tarquinian rule. The army is imagined turning against the king. The people support the revolt. Tarquin and his sons are driven out. Whether every step happened in that clean order cannot be known. What matters is the Roman political lesson. Kingship falls when the ruling family becomes a danger to the honorable households that helped sustain the city. From that point, the title Rex darkens. In Latin, Rex simply means king. In Roman political memory, it came to mean more than a form of government. It meant domination by one man. It meant a household standing above the rest. It meant power without term, without limit, without equal answer. Centuries later, Roman politicians could destroy an enemy by suggesting that he wished to be king. The accusation was poisonous because the Lucretia tradition had given Romans a moral image of what kingship could become. Collatinus shows how far the poison spread. In the tradition, he is Lucretia's husband and one of the first consuls after the kings are expelled, and he bears the Tarquin name. That is enough to make him unacceptable. Collatinus is not removed because he supports Sextus. He is removed because his name still ties the new order to the royal house. The Republic begins by rejecting not only the last king, but the whole shadow of Tarquinian identity. The third question follows of itself. What did Rome claim to put in a king's place? Not the absence of command. Rome still needed commanders and judges, religious authority, assemblies and men who could summon the Senate and lead armies. The answer was command shared and command timed. The king's power was remembered as passing to two chief magistrates called consuls. A consul was one of the two leading annual magistrates of the Roman Republic. Annual means he held office for 1 year, paired means there were two of them at once. Livy's own reading of the change makes the central point. Roman liberty began less because the old royal power was weakened, and more because the highest command was limited to a year and shared between colleagues. The Republic did not pretend that power was unnecessary. It tried to stop power from settling permanently in one man. Two other Roman words explain why this mattered. Imperium was the authority to command, above all the authority carried by senior magistrates and generals, not a vague influence, but real command over armies, public action, and coercive power. Auspices were the religious signs by which Roman magistrates sought divine approval for public acts. In Roman thinking, political authority and religious authorization were woven together. The consuls inherited serious authority from the kings, command, and sacred responsibility alike. That makes the change dramatic and limited at once. Dramatic because a king was gone and the highest office was no longer held for life by one man. Limited because the men who replaced him still held formidable power. They could command armies, summon public bodies, act in the name of the state. The Republic began not by abolishing command, but by dividing it, timing it, and setting it inside the competition of aristocratic peers. The early consular lists, called the fasti, ask for caution. The fasti were lists of magistrates by year, and the earliest stretch of them was shaped by later memory, family prestige, adjustment, and uncertainty. The first years should not be treated as a clean contemporary record, though Brutus and Collatinus stand as the most defensible core pair in the tradition. The broad institutional point is secure enough for this episode. The exact first-year sequence is not. That uncertainty is not a failure of the episode. It is part of the truth of early Rome. Later Romans wanted the Republic to begin with clear names, clear offices, and clear moral lessons. The surviving evidence suggests a rougher beginning. The fall of the kings probably belonged to a wider crisis in central Italy, with Etruscan power, Latin communities, elite rivalries, and Rome's own inner tensions all in play. The later account gives the beginning a clean shape. The historical process was probably less tidy. Here Lars Porsenna enters. Porsenna was the ruler of Clusium, an Etruscan city, and the Roman tradition set him in the aftermath of Tarquin's expulsion. The patriotic version gives Rome heroic scenes, Horatius cockles holding the bridge over the Tiber against the enemy, Collatia, a hostage, escaping across the river. These accounts mattered to Romans because they showed courage, chastity, endurance, and freedom under pressure. They are also exactly the kind of account that can make defeat look noble. The warning should stay visible. The heroic tales around Porsenna may cover the embarrassing possibility that Porsenna in fact occupied Rome or used it as a base for purposes of his own. That does not mean Horatius and Collatia should be mocked out of the episode. It means they should be understood as Roman memory doing political work. The young Republic wanted remembered heroes. It may also have had foreign pressure, defeat, or occupation to explain away. Lake Regillus belongs to the same difficult aftermath. Later Romans treated the battle as the final defeat of Tarquin's hopes, and the tradition gave it divine brightness through Castor and Pollux, the heavenly twins said to appear on Rome's side. That is powerful memory, not plain military reporting. The divine twins belong to a wider pattern of such tales. The safest saying is that Lake Regillus became a remembered closing of the struggle over kingship, not that every detail of the later battle account can be recovered as fact. The result is a republic born under pressure rather than unveiled on a single perfect morning. Lucretia and Brutus, Collatinus and Tarquin, the consuls, Porsenna, Horatius, Collatia, and Lake Regillus all belong to the Roman explanation of how monarchy ended, and they do not all stand at the same level of historical confidence. Some parts are institutional memory, some are moral example, some are patriotic legend, some may keep the outline of real conflict. Those layers should remain visible, for they are part of what early Rome gives us. The fourth question matters most for what comes after. What did Roman liberty mean at the beginning? The Latin word is libertas. It can be translated liberty or freedom, but early Roman libertas did not mean equal democracy for everyone in Rome. It meant first of all freedom from kings, that no royal household should stand permanently above the rest of the citizen body, and above all not above the leading families who expected to compete for honor, office, and command. The phrase res publica needs the same care. It means the public thing, the public business, the commonwealth. It does not of itself mean democracy in the modern sense. Rome's republic had assemblies and elections, magistrates, laws, and public rituals, and power remained heavily gathered among the aristocratic families. The liberty enjoyed most fully after the kings was the liberty of the wealthy and the politically dominant. Ordinary citizens were not nothing. They were not yet equal partners in government either. That makes the birth of the Republic real and unfinished at once. Real, because Rome did reject kingship as a legitimate political future, because annual paired magistracy changed the form of command, because the title rex became intolerable and Roman public life taught itself to fear domination by one man. Unfinished, because the new order had not yet answered who bore the costs of war, who fell into debt, who had access to office, who could resist a magistrate, and who counted fully inside liberty. That is why Lucretia's episode cannot end in simple celebration. Rome remembered the Republic as born from a demand for freedom, and the first freedom was narrow. It belonged most clearly to aristocratic men who wanted no king above them. The wider citizen body would have to fight its own long struggle over debt and military service, tribunes, written law, and political protection. That struggle belongs to the next episode, because it asks what happens when people who helped expel kings begin asking whether liberty includes them too. Still, the beginning matters. Rome's republic did not imagine itself as a clever administrative reform. It imagined itself as a moral refusal. A ruling household had crossed into violence and disgrace. A woman whose reputation stood for the order of the house was assaulted by a king's son. The men around her turned that violation into an oath. The royal family was expelled. The highest command was divided between two annual magistrates. And the word rex became a warning that would echo through Roman politics for centuries. Lucretia's tradition remains difficult because it carries more than one burden. It is the memory of a woman harmed by power. It is the memory of a household made into a public cause. It is the memory of aristocrats discovering that royal authority had become intolerable when it no longer respected their own standing. And it is the memory by which Rome explained why freedom began with the rejection of kings before Romans had agreed what freedom should mean for everyone else. At the end of this episode, the kings are gone, and the argument has only begun. Rome has a republic, at least in memory and in direction. It has consuls instead of a king. It has a political language built around the hatred of royal domination. What it does not yet have is a settled answer to the harder question. Once Rome belongs to the public thing, who is the public? The next stage begins when debt, military service, and written law force that question into the open.